You're listening to Ecosysteming, the podcast redefining economic development through the lens of equitable entrepreneurship, 2 decades in the making. Join NC Idea's Tom Rue as he engages with entrepreneurs and experts who are challenging the status quo and driving lasting change.
Hello and welcome to listeners of the Ecosysteming podcast. I'm your host, Tom Rue, and I am very excited today to be joined by Heather McWhorter, who is the director for the University of North Carolina Wilmington campus, specifically the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Heather, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on the Ecosysteming podcast.
Tom, thanks so much for having me, and thank you to everyone that's listening in.
So as some of the listeners would know, this is, our opportunity to talk to people like you, Heather, who are, what would I say, tongue-in-cheek, the getting stuff done people, right, in the ecosystem, the people that have the tireless and thankless job sometimes of making sure that we still have forward momentum in the space of entrepreneurial-led economic development. So before we dive into that portfolio of yours, maybe share some of your background, a little bit of your biography, so that listeners have kind of a frame of reference when we start talking about some more specifics.
Sure. I'll say, I know this is an entrepreneurial mindset podcast, but I will say I am the granddaughter of an entrepreneur who changed our family's trajectory. My grandfather started a business that was milk vending machines, and then grew to own a chain of restaurant or gas stations, kind of like Sheetz or Circle K, that you would go in and get deli ham and sandwiches made. And so that first generation of that, a whole chain of them. And so that changed the trajectory of our family. Of course, his children went to college, became big pharma executives, that sort of thing. So when you talk about belief in entrepreneurship and what can it do for people's lives, I think that's why I do what I do. So I became a chemical engineer. I have several engineering degrees, but I kept coming back to what entrepreneurs can do for a community is something I believe in. And so I accidentally fell into this ecosystem building for a living a couple decades ago. And the rest is history. And I can't wait to see what I continue to do in the future in partnership with my friends and our community.
Okay, let me ask this question then. How does one, quote, accidentally fall into this line of work?
Through connections. I was a military contractor at the time doing entrepreneurial work with the Department of Defense. I was doing a lot of collaborative work with weapon system managers, actually. As a 20-something-year-old, I get all the weapon system managers in a room and NASA and get them to agree upon things. I look back at that now and I see parallels, I think, to entrepreneurial ecosystems. Just everybody just needs to get along and collaborate, and we can do bigger things together. And so we rolled out new environmental technologies. That's what I was doing. Loved that job. Had my second baby, and I was living right next to Penn State University. And so one of my past coworkers said, Heather, I'm hiring at this thing at Penn State. Why don't you apply? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but yeah, I'm taking this maternity leave job. I'll do it for 2 years. Then I'm going back to the, supporting the military. And that baby is now an archaeologist. She's working on her PhD. And I that was at Penn State. I was there for 17 years. Worked up through the ranks up to and including doing, the biggest projects at Penn State. I could represent them nationally on their entrepreneurship and economic development initiatives. had a lot of fun projects that we did. Some of the things that I love still exist, like a TV show that I helped to raise money for. I envisioned and raised money for, and we rolled out that highlighted some entrepreneurs. So maybe we'll roll out a TV show in Wilmington. Who knows? So anyway, so then I was ready for something new, and I kept seeing online. Um, there seems to be something going on in Wilmington, North Carolina, which I had never been to, but my whole life I had vacationed in North Carolina. We had a home in Kitty Hawk. Um, and it just seemed very interesting. And I know now that was Jim Roberts' voice that I heard all the way up in Pennsylvania. He has a big voice.
That's one way to put it.
And so it intrigued me. Just with knowing I wanted to be part of this growing entrepreneurial ecosystem. I felt like I had something to give the coastal economy with my environmental background, but then also with it being the growing entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so I found a way to get my foot in the door 8 years ago, and here I am.
So, are you originally from Pennsylvania or somewhere up in the Northeast?
Wheeling, West Virginia,
Okay. So, we share that. Not that I'm from West Virginia, I'm from Northeast Ohio, but
just across the river.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And one of many, folks not native to North Carolina now living here, working here, and strengthening the economy through the portfolio of the work that you do. I think when people consider the economic might and success of North Carolina, I think a big part of it is how many people from other parts of the country have brought, their thinking, their best practices, their ambition
Hmm.
to bring it here. And similar to you, yeah, I wasn't raised here, but the first trip we made to the Outer Banks was when I think I was 6. It was 5 or 6, and I still have a cherished photo of my father and I on the beach down in Hatteras Island, right? Because we stayed at the campground there at the where the lighthouse is for many years. It was weird. It was like so many people from Northeast Ohio go to the Outer Banks, and yeah, I have subsequently, we've rented summer places from Kitty Hawk, Duck, all the way down to Ocracoke. Um, it's a place I feel very comfortable, and I think I don't know. I just think that's kind of cool that so many of us have similar stories, right, from our childhood.
It's such a magic place, and you think of those memories. I started when I was 2 years old. I have pictures of me 2 years old on the Outer Banks, and just through the years. And every now and then, when my parents would get a wild hair, we would go to Long Beach, so Oak Island, which is I go there on the weekends now, right? It was a much longer drive, but just to change up the scenery. And I actually just recently found, and my mom would write journals, of our trip. I just found a journal from 1978 of one of our trips to Long Beach and all the places that we visited.
Oh, that has to be cool. That's better than the old, 8 millimeter home movies.
Right.
So you had this portfolio of work at Penn State, which 17 years. That's quite a portfolio that you can build on. And you heard the calling, or I'm sorry if I missed it. Like, how did you get connected into UNCW?
I had an incredible job at Penn State. I could move a mountain in a day. I felt like I had like in State College, there's only 45,000 people and then 45,000 students. So when you live there so long and you raise your kids there, like I knew everyone. So this is before I really knew what an ecosystem was, since this is what this podcast is about. I guess I just took that for granted. Um, and so, literally, January 2017, in a blizzard, I was sitting in the parking lot outside of my innovation center, and I saw in the National Association of Small Business Development Centers newsletter this job posting for the regional center director of the SBTDC. And I texted my boyfriend at the time, we'd only been dating for a couple months, and I said, "Do you want to move to Wilmington?" And he fired back immediately, "Heck yeah."
Oh my.
And so I had just bought a house a year and a half before that. I was ready. I was ready for an adventure. I had my teenagers, and I was a crazy woman pursuing this job, pursuing this adventure. I had state directors contacting the state director down here because I kind of had a network. Um, and so, long story short, got the regional center director job. But I got down here and it was like, okay, I'm ready. And it was kind of like crickets. It's like, it took me forever to get anything done. I didn't know who was who because because of my network, right? Because when you are brand new and you show up in a community, you have to find the people who know the people, and that doesn't happen overnight. Like I feel like now after 8 years, I'm finally figuring it out a little bit. It's 17 years I'll finally hit stride. But these things take time because ecosystems, they're invisible infrastructures. They're the connections between people. So we're part of building those communities, but also we have to be part of the communities. And there's no roadmap of how to navigate. You just have to keep pushing it and bouncing around in it and finding the people that can help you, that can connect you, that are aligned with the same values and mission as you.
I used to hear, or I've heard that effect referred to as the collision of networks,
Yes.
where you just have to be out there. But I also want to be using these podcasts to, speak candidly about this work that we do. And, you said at the beginning, it took forever to get anything done. And I'll have to say, I think most of you all, our partners, our friends, who help us do this important work, build strength in this thing of ours. I think a lot of times you're all taken for granted by the communities you serve. And, I know you started about a year after I started my role. So I just had my 9-year anniversary. And I remember my first trips out to the coast, in this capacity, it was anemic. There was starts and stops, and people like Jim and Diane Durant's, before you, like there seemed to be like incremental work, and then, whatever happens, and then it's all kind of mothballed for a while.
Right.
And when I reflect now, when I come into town for events and I reflect, like, what the vibe is and how many people are in the room, and, the diversity of people in the room, representing all facets of what we need for, entrepreneurial building blocks, and think about what it was like 6, 7, 8 years, 9 years ago, it's dramatically changed.
Well, and I think some of the things that have changed. So I tried to pull some statistics. I tried to do some research before this because I wanted to know more about entrepreneurial ecosystem builders. Give me some statistics about women entrepreneurial ecosystem builders, about diversity. Like, is there any research that's been done about can you build an innovation economy faster when you have gender representation, different minority representation?
Are we allowed to look at that right now?
We're talking among friends right now.
I'm kidding. I'm being a jerk. I should mention for the people listening, we actually can see each other while we record these. So I've got, this kind of smirk on my face saying that, and we can talk about the current environment later in the podcast. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Just last week, a founder said to me, because I was connecting one of our founders here to somebody else, and he said to me, Heather, you connect people so much differently, yet so much more effectively than this other male ecosystem builder here. I'm not going to say who it was. It's just I ecosystem differently. And it's the mom in me. I have 3 kids. I am the fill. I'm going to give you milk and cookies and make you do things without you knowing that you need to do them. Like as an entrepreneur, as a founder, I'm going to talk you into doing them versus, I would, if I'm going to make stereotypes, men might be more direct, right? And so I think it takes everybody to build an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so also when you look at things in Wilmington like Channel, like Genesis Block, so minority business accelerators as ecosystem leaders in our region, it takes all of the above um, to build an innovation economy.
Yeah, very well said. And I would, through my own experience, I know that there are differences to the, based upon gender on how people even feel comfortable doing certain types of work. And that's why I've always felt that this key to the success is broad diversity. Like everybody has to have a seat at the table. And in the collective, we find the optimal zone because there are some people I've thought about some of these connections we've made. Obviously, NCIDA, we do a lot of matchmaking, and there are some people that they want the blunt, you know, introduction, no puffery, nothing. Just you need to talk to so and so, so and so. You need to know so and so. I'm done here, right? Others need more finesse and a little bit more subtlety so that people understand the mutual benefit to doing that. And no one person's ever going to get it always right. So if we flood the zone with a plurality of backgrounds and opinions and values and styles, then I think we serve the broadest swath of the ecosystem that we can. And I think that's part of the magic of what we all collectively do together. So yeah, I can completely believe that. So let's stay in the ecosystem for a while. I know, there's we're all, and you are part of our cherished network, so about peers in different parts of the state that are doing work similar to yours. And so there are these areas of ecosystem building that are applied generically regardless of where in the state we are. But I think you in particular, and another reason why I was excited to talk to you today, is that you started carving out a niche play that is specific to the coastal region, and namely the introduction of the Ocean Innovation Conference. And I think putting some formal structure around, blue economy. I would be very remiss of me not to tee you up for an
Absolutely.
opportunity to talk about that. So why don't I just shut up now for a minute and let you talk about that? But it is a great portfolio piece that helps your region differentiate, and what it does for North Carolina is help North Carolina differentiate at a national scale.
Yeah. So, and I love to talk about this. So thank you for queuing me up. Um, when you, it, way back, I can't believe it's been 5 years, but during the COVID lockdown, when everybody was trying to decide what they wanted to do with their lives, some people were changing careers, some people were quitting their jobs. Diane Durant's, the prior director, I could not take credit for this, said, how might we combine our incredible entrepreneurial community that we have in Wilmington, for one of the best in the world, for a small city, with our love for the ocean and our knowledge of the problems related to living along the coast? So she took that nugget of an idea, right, and really started delving in. And so um, then she moved back to Michigan and, and I inherited that idea, and I have really worked to build out that idea because I believe that this is an incredible opportunity for our community, for our problem solvers, as well as for the ocean, for the problems and opportunities related to the ocean. So um, we have a whole suite of programs from ideation up to and including growth, um, to start the flywheel of problem solving along the coast here in the blue economy. So blue economy is the businesses for, let's define it, businesses and economic um, opportunities related to the ocean and our waterways, but we add in also to that definition sustainable growth. So we've we have this Ocean Innovation Conference that is sold out 2 years in a row now. That will be held again in September. We'll continue that into the future. This conference is just incredible. It has everybody from policymakers, venture capital, startups to high school students and UNCW students, retirees. It's people who care and want to be part of the solution. And it's about activating our innovation community related to the ocean. We have a pre-accelerator program called Idea Test Lab that is, again, I feel like it's incredible. I'm very excited about it. It's a 4-week cohort-based program to help you figure out with this idea that I have, is there a business model there? And then share it with the world, right? So we will help people advance these ideas. We have a startup weekend designed around this idea again of ocean innovation. We helped to launch the first ever financial index that measures the worldwide blue economy on Bloomberg. I guess I should have started there.
I was waiting. I was hoping I was going to have to remind you that because I've been at, spoiler alert, we have been a proud sponsor of the conference for the first 2 years, and I think we probably would do it again. And again, I'm giving a silly smirk. I think it's pretty much a fait accompli. But this index, and I'm gonna see if I got it right, and I'll try to make the commercial for you. The importance of this index is so that the world, whether it's the private equity world, whether it's debt financing world, whether it's policymakers, whether it's people like the World Economic Forum, can see this as a cluster and put a size to how big the impact is, right? I think some people, and I'm saying this from personal experience, they hear blue economy, and it was funny because 2 years ago, in the same week I attended your conference on quote blue economy, I ended the week at a green economy conference. And somebody asked me, well, what's the difference? Right? Because I think some people think, well, if you're talking about the ocean, you're probably talking about, sustainability and climate and it's kind of stuff that some people characterize as that like do-gooder space. And certainly that's part of it. But your focus and this index focuses on like, no, 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 no. It's the economic impact and the might of everything collectively. Like, large scale transportation, like, these ocean going freighters, how much economic activity that drives. I remember our mutual acquaintance, Mark Wong, spoke at your conference. And then I stole the idea from you and had him speak at our annual summit as well. And I remember his statistics that he brought on this were so massive, right? If it were GDP, it would be bigger than like half the countries in the world. And so I think this index helps people understand that this is I'll use the word because it's imperfect, but we use it in this space, a cluster, right? So there's this cluster of the blue economy that really should be getting a lot of attention, investment, and interest.
100%. It'd be the 11th largest country.
Yeah. Holy crap.
And so, yeah, and so we can't ignore it. So it's a huge economy. So we also, we also want to take care of it because of the economic part of it. But we can't ignore it. It's not an afterthought. It is one of the drivers of the world's economy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was, like I said, of year number one. I think that was like thing I got very excited about because that transcends like regional economic development or even statewide economic development or ecosystem building. It's something that the world should be looking at, and you all are publishing it. So you've created it, you've launched it, and now it's going to be a data source. I mean, I remember my time at the Kauffman Foundation, there was this longitudinal study. It was one of the longest at the time in the country. It was the firm formation survey, and it had been a couple of decades in the work. And that data set itself had spawned over 100 peer-reviewed journal articles that got published, because that just people looking at it that way as a cluster and saying, oh, there's data on this now. And then, what you can measure, you can work towards. So big props on having the foresight to do that. And I think it's, like I said, I think it's a service to the world that goes beyond your own, self-interested, ways to use it to like validate what you're doing there. It's a gift for the world, financially speaking. So
So, and also to bring it back to the state as well, on CIE's website, we have an asset map that we publish that has all of the blue economy assets across North Carolina. So if you want to see all the blue tech startups, if you want to see where the marinas are, if you want to see where the environmental consultants are, et cetera, all the way down the list, you can look at it through all the different GIS layers. It's something that we just decided to do. We just go out and just decide to do these things. Entrepreneurial, I don't know. And then we also have a free asynchronous class if you want to start growing oysters. So you can just let us know. And oh, by the way, you can also earn a UNCW digital badge that will go on your transcript forever if you complete it. So it also lives on our website. Just reach out, contact me, and I can get you in the course.
it's funny you mentioned the course on growing oysters. A couple of weeks ago, I got to join one of our seed-funded companies, going back 9 years now, Sandbar Oyster Company. They, developed a proprietary substrate material that's very, very good at capturing oyster spat, and then growing these kind of oyster reefs, with the additional benefit of living shoreline protection and restoration. And it's so awesome. So many years later, then we all, bunch of volunteers. I think the effort was led by the Coastal Federation. We went to Bald Head Island and we did a big install of these tables, as they call them, tables and pillows. They're just these cool geographic shapes of hardened concrete that are formed in a certain way that makes them resilient to wave energy dissipation. And then I took all these pictures, we talked to all these people, and there was a lot of us saying, oh, we got to come back and check. And I said, oh, you need to, because I've seen other installations that were done years ago. You wouldn't even recognize it anymore, right? Because all that substrate goes away. It doesn't go away, it gets covered and it gets filled in. And then you get these marsh grasses that come back behind it, and you actually extend shoreline that's been lost, to all manner of forces that are doing it. So I don't know, I always get excited when you can see kind of the physical manifestation of the work that, people that you and I serve, that, because they're the ones out there in the water putting that material there and learning, overnight success, 10 years in the making in Neil's case. But it's pretty cool. So I don't want to bring the mood down a little bit, but I do. Again, we're keeping it real. So much good going on. What's lacking in the space? And you would have, a much more informed view of that, because you're kind of at that nexus where this activity is happening. So yes, the Wilmington/coastal region has just shot up, and it's through your efforts and Jim's and others, and Diane, who's gone before you. Like, it's been a team effort for sure. But and we will keep it light. We'll just say, like, you have a magic wand now, right? Or you're a mermaid. We'll keep it coastal. So I now declare you a magical mermaid with the ability to address anything that's lacking,
Yeah.
in the space, in the ecosystem. What would be your first priorities? What magic would you spin?
My magic I would spin. Well, the thing that I ponder on is not to talk about diversity again, but when you think about environmental justice and coastal resiliency, like we live in Hurricane Alley here. And the populations that are affected by flooding and climate are the most tend to be diverse populations. However, they're not our tech startups right now. And so I keep wanting to figure out, I'm a mermaid, how to connect people who are impacted the most with these problems with the solutions. Because I think about like when people have a solution and they arrive to a community like I'm going to save the day with this amazing solution, but they haven't really been affected by it, right? Like I want more of the communities involved that are affected. That's what I want. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. I mean, it is not, I'm not sitting by the sidelines. It's just what I'm trying to figure out.
No, I think that's admirable. I think that's on point. It's also consistent with some of my own professional experience. Many years ago, I took a trip to Bangladesh, and you want to talk about a nation that is impacted by climate change. First of all, they have the highest density, population density per square foot of space acreage, and a vast majority of their population is affected by flooding, rising sea levels, displacement, like you said. And these are the people that are at the absolute bottom of the economic hierarchy there, right? And it's just taken as, I don't know, kind of like a fact of life, right? It's weird. I always would say that my kids would always hate when I'd come back from one of my international trips because it resets your perspective. Like we have challenges in the US, we certainly do, but I saw poverty there that makes anything we experience in the US pale in comparison. It's a whole different level. And a lot of it is around climate change because these people are ostensibly, they're nomads. They can't live in the same place year round because large swaths of where they live are underwater, for 6 months out of the year. And so, how do they adapt? And how does technology intervene, right, to bring other solutions? And I think you are absolutely right. I think that's, I'm getting a little bit meta now, right? When you think of some of these big organizations that, big names that, Clinton Foundation, Aspen Institute, World Economic Forum, right? They operate at this big global macro level, but it's a lot of the people you're talking about that aren't impacted by this. I've heard it. Dubbed the curse of good intentions. Right? These people come in there and say, "Oh yeah, we're gonna fix this," and they mean well, bless their heart, in the way we say that in the South. But they lack some perspective, right, from those that are impacted by it. And I think if you can figure out a way to bring that voice and that experiential kind of guidance to this equation, you will build solutions that are going to be more lasting, resilient, more efficient, and more direct to the point, even if they're a little harder to sell to the people that need to fund it, right? Because that's part of the disconnect. There's still basic economics that are involved, and that those people that are on the low end of the economic food chain, the people with the resources to do something about it, it's not obvious to find the incentives for them to do something about it, right? It's not good enough that it's just the right and decent thing to do. They need to have kind of an ROI model for that. And that's a frustration of mine. I'm getting a little personal here, but it is what it is. And it's a reality we can't wish away or fight against. Well, at least I can't, because I'm not a mermaid with superpowers like you are. So I got to just deal with the constraints that I have, right? But I think you're spot on, and you know that's why we're kindred spirits, and that's why we're both doing this work together. And you're part of our, I think, our very trusted partner network to really do this. And I don't even know that I said it yet in the podcast, so let me say it now. I really appreciate you and the work that you and, again, so many other colleagues are doing, because we can't do it alone.
Oh, well, and we can't do it alone either. Like I have been so impressed by NC Idea since I moved to North Carolina. And I wanted to make sure I said that as well during the podcast. Like, we didn't have this in Pennsylvania. And the fact that you can build intentionally a statewide ecosystem and bring us together and support our, not only support our founders, but also support us in building a statewide presence. It's just incredible. It's a gift. I hope everybody understands how important that is to our economy.
Well, I thank you for saying that. And I'll tell you a little moment of personal pride or parental pride. I too have three children. So, the father and me, when we do our annual meeting with all of our partners, and I don't mean the annual summit, I mean the June meeting where it's kind of just us. I sit back with such like a pride, paternalistic. I can't help myself because I see genuine friendships, between all of you. And I think we're all better off for the knowledge sharing that we do and how we support one another and collaborate the way we do. And, it's the secret to this work. Did I ever share the secret? I'm going to lean into the microphone. Christian always hates this when I do this because it throws off the audio levels. But the secret to this work is there's no secret. It's just really good people like you, Heather, pursuing important work that is, sufficiently resourced, so funded, you know, patiently supported so that the community understands it takes time. We can't, fix everything overnight. And then it's grinding it out. It's having that summit every year, right? Where people start going, oh, yeah, I met you at the Ocean Innovation Conference 3 years ago, right? And that esprit de corps. And, I want to get my third year stamp this year because I'm going to talk to also 3 more people that I haven't met before. That's the secret to this work. It's the grind.
It is the grind.
Smart people grinding it out. Data also. We're big data people, right? Because you got to measure it so that you're really on target. And you got to correct too. We eat our own dog food, as I like to say. We're very entrepreneurial on this, so we'll try stuff. There's room for trial and error because you have to, right? And I think what we collectively have done is we've created a playbook that any other state in the nation can take and replicate if you wanted to do this, at a statewide level. We've got those experiences, those procedures, those programs, those protocols, and the way we've built all this. And I feel frankly privileged to lead this work. I thank my board every quarter that they haven't fired me yet. And the team is sticking around. We've got some, I just had 9 years, but Sarah, one of my first hires, who, I hired her like 6 months after I started. So she's on year 8, right? Plus, and we've got a lot of tenure here because this is the people that are in this work. And I'm going to speak for you and include you in this. This is more of a calling. It's not just a job, right? Especially with you, with your pedigree, your CV, such that it is, you could get a job anywhere, right?
There's been a standing joke that who knows if Heather would hit the lotto or not. Who knows if she hit the lotto, because she would just show up at work the next day. I'm like, well, where else would I go?
Right. Same. People have asked me if I'm ever going to retire. And I'm like, well, I mean, at some point, somebody's going to push me out the door, but I don't golf. Right. And I fish. That's my passion, but I can't do that, 5 days a week. So I love what I do and I love evolving. And, we got off a call recently with a national organization that's doing this kind of ecosystem work. And it's a big brand that everybody knows. And, they made the kind of the observation like, man, you guys, you have such a unique and strong portfolio in North Carolina. Like I know just about everybody we deal with in other states would kill, to have that full portfolio. Like there's states that have like pieces of what we do, right? But to have this portfolio, it's special. And again, I'll thank you for being a big part of that. So before I get the hook from Christian, just as I say it, it shows up on our screen. That's funny. Going to get the hook from Christian to, land the plane. If you've watched any of these other or heard any of the other podcasts, you know how I like to wrap these up. And if you didn't, then I'm going to ask you the question. You're already smirking, so I think you know what my punchline is here. We all work together in this space, so it's obvious that we're going to have a lot of mutual connections. On LinkedIn, how many mutual connections would you speculate we have, you and I share?
382.
Well, I've got different numbers because according to LinkedIn, just moments ago, we now have 393.
Okay, well, maybe there was 5 more since I checked after listening.
So 393, we've already mentioned Jim Roberts, and you referenced Genesis Block, that's Gerard and Tracy Newkirk, Chikima Clinton Quintana, director of channel at Live Oak, David Reeser, one of our funded companies, Opiate.
He was at CIE today.
Yeah, he's a oh man, like to me, he represents like a prototypical, like if we could replicate an entrepreneur type model, it would be him. I'll tell you quickly a funny story with David. So David did, and he's talked about this. I'm not telling tales out of school here. He had applied, for our grant multiple times, and it's very, very rare, very rare. Like count on a left, one left hand of a butcher, how many times somebody's applied once and won it on one. But on one of his times, he got close, and we had a big debate, and I couldn't suspend my own personal bias. Like I wanted him to get funded, so I was really kind of bummed out that he didn't quite make it that round. But in my head, I was like, oh no, you absolutely should have, right? So I bump into him at an event in the ecosystem, such that it is. And I just tell him like, oh, how, happy I am for him. And so glad we could support him. And like, that things are going great. And if you know David, he's so polite and nice. And he looks at me, he lets me talk, just like a fish taking line, just spooling out line. And he just says, hey, I don't want to be impolite, but you're talking like you did fund us and you didn't. I was like, oh man, does that sting? And I was like, oh, sorry. Because like in my head, he should have won, right? Now I'm happy to report on the next time he applied, he did win. And I think it was, kind of there's no exact science to this. You're a reviewer, you're in the room when those decisions get made, right? It's not a absolutely perfect process. There's a lot of subjectivity to it. But again, if you get 30, 40 smart, committed people in the room, you'll make the right decision more often than not, right? And David certainly was a right decision. So I think that's awesome. And again, kudos to everybody, in the Wilmington ecosystem, to just see where it's come from to where it is now has just been wonderful. And y'all represent now in all these listicles that come out. If there was any kind of inferiority complex of like, the redheaded stepchild at the family reunion, I would say there's no reason for it because, you're right there. I mean, the triangle will always just through density kind of be like Silicon Valley, so to speak. But there's a lot of great other regional ecosystems, and together we're all stronger. So thank you for being part of that. Thank you for joining me on the Ecosysteming podcast today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. This was fun.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's puts a wrap to today's episode.
Thank you.
Stay connected with NC Idea on LinkedIn and Facebook, and subscribe to our newsletter for all the latest as we celebrate our 20th year. Catch new episodes of Ecosysteming every other Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in and being a part of this thing of ours.